This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight with what the president has had to say today about the situation in the Persian Gulf. The sand is running through the glass, he said. Saddam Hussein is worse than Adolf Hitler, he said. I am not trying to prepare the American people for war with Iraq, he said. The president was out on the campaign trail today, and ABC's Britt Hume was with him.
Wherever he went to campaign today, the president brought up the Gulf crisis, though he insists it's not a partisan issue. And once again, he seemed to be warning the public that a nonviolent outcome there may not be possible.
I want desperately to have a peaceful resolution to this crisis. We are giving the sanctions the time to work, and I hope that there will never be a shot fired in anger, but let me be very, very clear. There will be no compromise on the stated objectives of the United Nations Security Council resolutions, none at all.
That UN resolution calls for nothing less than Saddam Hussein's unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait. The president called it a fundamental point of morality and said 3 times today he would not yield on it. At a news conference later in Florida, however, he insisted he is not trying to get the country ready for armed conflict.
And I am not trying to prepare our country for war. We have had a little bit of a hiatus because of the attention on the budget and other matters from keeping in focus our objectives in Iraq.
Mr. Bush denied that time had turned against the U.S. and its allies, but he also made clear that time has become a factor.
The sand is running through the glass, and we've got these economic sanctions in play, and I think there's an urgency on the part of people to understand, desire on their part rather, to understand whether the sanctions are working.
On that point, the president has left the unmistakable impression the sanctions are not working as well as he would like. The only other option is war, and if the president isn't intending that message for the American public, he is surely aiming it at Saddam Hussein. Britt Hume, ABC News, Orlando, Florida.
Mr. Bush was clearly not happy today with Saddam Hussein's suggestion that family members could come to visit their relatives being held in Iraq during the Christmas holidays. The president said calling them guests is unconscionable. They are hostages, he said, and they should be sent home. And an equally strong position today taken at the State Department. Here's ABC's John McWethy.
The State Department called the Christmas invitation shameless, cruel, and insensitive.
The idea that this is somehow supposed to be in the Christmas spirit of having people come visit family members who are being held as hostages at strategic sites is just really a very sick notion.
Spokesperson Margaret Tutwiler said the U.S. would not prevent family members from going, but warned it could be very risky, and the family members themselves might become hostages. Donita Cole's 50-year-old husband, John, is a hostage, and her son is now in Saudi Arabia with the U.S. military. Would she take up Saddam Hussein's Christmas offer?
If I can go over there and have Christmas and feel safe, then I'll go.
She, like many other hostage families, is increasingly frustrated with the State Department.
They're so busy trying to be diplomats that they sometimes forget what they're supposed to be diplomats about.
Frustration for the families is rising as they hear new details of what being a hostage is like. Recently released French hostages carried letters from several Americans describing what they called the Iraqi gulag. Bars on the windows, locks on the door, and armed guards at night. One wrote, quote, "I have been moved 5 times, not heard from anyone since August 16th. Tell my wife I love her." Another hostage urged that all those in captivity not be forgotten. That will be increasingly difficult to do as the issue of American hostages once again appears to be moving towards center stage. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
Other news from the Middle East today. Israel's prime minister, or police minister rather, has announced a shakeup of the country's police forces. No details. A recent government report criticized police for their role in the violence, which led to the deaths of at least 17 Palestinians at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. The UN Secretary General, whose effort to investigate the shooting was rejected by Israel, has now issued a report. It called for an international conference to find new ways to protect Palestinians under Israeli occupation. The Justice Department said today that the FBI will investigate the possibility of a link between the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 and an undercover U.S. drug operation. That story came to light a couple of days ago, and the Drug Enforcement Administration has already begun its own investigation. In a moment, a big change for the Big Mac. And on the American agenda tonight, how much offensive speech should be tolerated on campus, and why language and situations once offensive to many now appear nightly on television.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by